I want to welcome everybody to the first committee meeting of retirement. I'm Senator Randy Robertson. I'll be the chair of the meetings. I want to welcome all my committee members that have been assigned to this, what I feel is one of the most important committees here in the Capitol, just because of the fact that we lean on so many people to keep our state running, and we need to make sure those individuals are compensated fairly, and that, which we all know, fair compensation leads to high morale, and that's exactly what we need in our state during years when there's not a pandemic, and we certainly need it this year with the pandemic impacting us the way it has. But before we get going, I would like to ask the good Senator Cardin Summers, if you would, to open the meeting with a prayer.
I'd be glad to. Our kind and gracious Heavenly Father, as we come to you today, we ask, we seek your wisdom, we seek your guidance. We know that you send your blessings to us always. We ask that you bless this committee, that we do the right thing, and we always look after the people of the great state of Georgia. Please be with each and every one of us. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Okay, as we move forward, each committee member, you should have a copy of the committee rules in your packet. If you'll take a minute to take a look at those and see if you have any questions or concerns. And if not, I will entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion?
I think these are the same as last year, aren't they?
They are. Not hearing any discussion. All in favor, if you'll please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Thank you. What I've asked today is there's several groups throughout state government that have a vested interest in the retirement systems that exist here, which to many Georgians, they have absolutely no idea exactly how many retirement systems we have here in the state. So I've invited the individuals that manage those systems, that keep their eye on legislation that impacts those systems, to come in today if they want to, and to give a brief explanation of what the group's responsibilities are, and at the same time, if you have a particular concern. And what I do not want to do is I do not want to get down into the weeds on legislation, just a particular concern that you may have from the perspective of the employees that you represent and whose plan that you manage. So as we move forward with that, I'll start here at mic number 10. And if you'll do me a favor, if you'll introduce yourself, tell us what programs you're involved in, which is a nice fat list, and then let us know what you're concerned about this session, or what you'd like to see.
Mr. Chair, am I on? Everybody hear me? Okay. Very good. Thank you. It's a pleasure to speak to you all this afternoon. I appreciate the opportunity. My name is Jim Potvin. I'm the Executive Director for the Employees Retirement System, Georgia. Employees Retirement System, the system is the flagship system for most state employees. But our portfolio of systems goes well beyond that. We are also responsible as an agency for the administration of 4 other pension systems, and those are the public school employees retirement system. Those are for the non-teacher folks, the bus drivers and cafeteria workers, custodians, those employees. We're responsible for the legislative retirement system, the Georgia Judicial Retirement System, and the Georgia Military Pension Fund. I see a number of you taking notes. I have a 2-page document I can forward to you all. Yeah, I think you have it. And I'm happy to do that through the committee if you'd like. In addition to the 5 pension systems, we're responsible for 3 what they call defined contribution or savings plans. The state's 401k and 457 plans, collectively known as Peach State Reserves, and the Georgia Defined Contribution Plan, which is a savings program for part-time and seasonal employees. We also have responsibility for 2 group life insurance programs, both of which are closed to new hires since 2009, but there are a number of legacy employees that we still have to administer benefits for. that's kind of the general profile. The ERS plan is by far the largest of the ones that we administer. We receive data and contributions from over 400 employers statewide. The plan itself is broken up into 3 benefits tiers. What we call the old plan was for new hires prior to 1982. The so-called new plan was for new hires between 82 and the end of 2008, and the current tier, we call that the GSEPS tier, the Georgia State Employees Pension and Savings Plan. That is a hybrid tier made up of a smaller pension benefit, but also a 401k plan with a state matching contribution, so kind of a corporate-style state 401k match. So it's a bit of a blend between employee responsibility for maintaining and updating their savings and the state for the pension portion of it. Obviously, as a pension system, we are very dependent on a number of different factors, a number of different assumptions that we make in order to calculate the assets and the liabilities of the system. We review those assumptions every 5 years or so. We just finished doing that. The board accepted the latest, what we call experience study in December. At that point, we evaluate actual experience versus the assumed experience that we had set 5 years previously. Things like mortality assumptions and rates of retirement and salary increases and all those different kinds of things are taken into account. The other thing that we're very dependent on, of course, is the investment performance in the markets. Certainly the pandemic gave us a bit of a roller coaster ride early this past year, I should say, between February and April. Showed you, I think, the type of volatility that is out there that we could experience in the short term. We do look at things from a long-term perspective, so we try not to overreact to events like that. Nevertheless, I will tell you that there was something of a bit of relief on my part that we did bounce back as strongly as we have. And in fact, since July 1, we've returned about 19% on our assets in the fiscal year to date. That is compared to our annual goal of 7.3% that we look for and that we assume is going to happen. So this year so far has been a good year, but we don't take that for granted given the events of this past year. From an operational standpoint, we, like many other agencies, have sent our employees home, and they're pretty much entirely working remotely. That has not impacted our operations to any great degree, with the one exception being that, of course, we're not seeing people face-to-face, but otherwise, the business of answering phone calls and responding to requests and getting the checks out in time is something that we're able to do and we have continued to do throughout the pandemic. So I'm pleased with the flexibility shown by our staff and our ability to do that, to keep things running. We have about 56,000 active members in the ERS plan, about 54,000 retirees. Total, we pay those folks about $1.4 billion per year, an average of $2,200 per individual, per retiree, per month. That number is actually decreasing over time as we move into the newer pension tiers. As I said, those are smaller benefits just on the pension side, so that has resulted in a reduction of the average monthly benefits. Before the question gets asked, I might as well go ahead and bring it up. The board has the authority to decide on whether or not to pay post-retirement benefit adjustments, COLAs, as they do for the teachers' retirement system. In the case of the ERS, the COLAs are not factored into the assumptions for the plan. We don't assume that we're going to be paying COLAs. We don't try to get them paid for until after the board approves them. What has happened is, as the system has grown, and we've experienced volatility, the dot-com crash and the Great Recession most recently, that has resulted in situations where paying a COLA, the board has deemed that to be very expensive for the system, and they have resisted doing that. We have paid one-time checks, non-compounding checks in several of the past few years, but we have not paid an actual COLA because of the expense since about 2009. So that is something that you are likely to, if you have not already, hear from your constituents about that as an issue that has been current for us for some period of time, and I guess that would fall into my current list of concerns that the chairman asked me to talk about. If there's anything else, any questions that you have, I'd be happy to answer them.
Could you just spell your last name for us, please?
Oh, sure. Potman is Potbin.
Thank you.
Good to see you again, and you talked about the 19%, which I guess isn't for a full year, that's just from July. So about 8 months. What was the year before that? I know that was a tough year for every system.
Last year, we actually ended up at 5.48%,
Mm-hmm.
which all things considered, considering that at one point we were at negative 15, I'm very pleased with the 5.5. And compare that to the median for our peers around the country, which is about 3.1%. We feel pretty good about our results last year.
Can you tell, who is in the room that represents which organization?
Yeah, we're making our way around. This was the representative of ERSGA here.
So the only handout we have is from.
Correct.
Correct. Can you tell us again your full name, please?
Yeah, it's Jim Potman, Potbin.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee and other attendees. Can you hear me okay? Hi, I am Chuck Friedman. I am legislative, it's F-R-E-E-D-M-A-N. I'm legislative liaison for the Georgia State Retirees Association. Our president, Jim Somerville, could not be here today. Chuck Clay, I don't think is in the room. He is he also represents us as our professional. The Georgia State Retirees Association was founded in 2007. I'm proud to say I was part of that. Came out of a meeting of folk who had, for the most part, been with the state auditor and Office of Planning and Budget. I was division director there. Among the other co-founders were a former state auditor and OPB director and deputy legislative budget officer before the two budget offices got split. Also a former commissioner of personnel administration. Since then, our membership, active and inactive, is grown to 7,500 members. We're a very diverse crowd now from all positions, all agencies in state government. We have 20-odd chapters throughout the state. I, too, brought a handout, unfortunately not enough for all of y'all, but I'll be able to distribute later. It talks about our purpose. We're a nonprofit organization. We advocate for active and retired employees and educators. We're looking for mostly for preservation of benefits and also to oppose anything that we see that might make inroads into those benefits. So since educators have the same health insurance that we do, then when it comes to health benefits, we can be upwards of 600,000 strong when it comes for there. As Jim said, that there are 54,000 retirees now. I do want to say that over the years we've had a good relationship with the employees' retirement system. I think that has improved very steadily over the last several years. We've had many cooperative activities that our organization has the utmost confidence in the organization of the board in preserving our benefits. They've done an outstanding job of keeping the pension fund stable. Where we feel improvements are necessary on the very same post-retirement benefits that Jim mentioned before, which ERS retirees have not received other than one-time payments, for pushing on 13 years. During that time, the wages of inflation have very negatively impacted our members, whose average benefit is a mere $22,000 per year. That compares to $37,000 for educators. As meager as that is, there still has, with 54,000 recipients, that still has a plus benefit in the local communities, with their being able to make expenditures there and support enterprises there. The one thing you got to understand about inflation, all measures that come out of the Labor Department seek to remain constant. So when they say inflation has increased 20-odd% since 2009, that's for like population groups. But our population in particular have gotten, well, all the population has gotten older, but when you start old, your expenses increase regardless of inflation, particularly in the health area. If any of you have had to obtain personal assistance for family members or close ones, you know how much that is. It could be upwards of, in the metro area, it's $20 an hour. You multiply that, over 365 days, you're well over $100,000. Assisted living. My mother, as a precaution, had long-term care insurance, but she outlived it. And that was going, pushing on $80,000 a year for assisted living. Skilled nursing care, that much more expensive. So our members, well, let's just say this. In 2008 and 9, back with the Great Recession, state government, as it does for all similar occurrences, contracts. And since I worked in the Office of Planning Budget, I was not a budget analyst, but I'm quite familiar with the techniques. You get cash from wherever you can to make sure you can continue operations and balance the budget. That's in lean years. In less lean years, when revenues start coming in again, there has always been, and I can speak going back to 1973 personally, a concerted effort to make all the programs that were cut of necessity, to make them whole again. And that has been done for virtually every program that was in effect in 2008, but one. And that's for ERS retirees. Y'all know that, last year, that many of you here volunteered to take a 10% reduction. You pitched one in for the team. Well, ERS retirees did that as well. But, now that revenues are coming in again, you're anticipating being back at your full pay. I presume, I don't know that for a fact. And ERS retirees had hoped for that as well. Members of the other large retirement system, they continued getting their 3% every year, and they still do to this day. So the major difference, and Jim and I see this differently, is that up into the mid-2000s, ERS, like TRS, for those two, the COLAs were funded as part of the actuarially determined employer contribution, or ADEC. In other words, they were included in the budget request from the board to the governor, which the governor presented to the General Assembly and was always appropriated. But since the mid-2000s, the amount of money in the ERS ADEC no longer covers the cost of living adjustments, but TRS does. So that we're hoping that a plan can be made Now, it's going to be a big gulp to do it all at once. I mean, a really fire hose size big gulp. But what we're advocating for is that there be a start. And we've discussed this with the chairman as well as with ERS. We have some alternatives that we would appreciate being considered here. You know, it's kind of a catch-22. You talk to ERS, they say that it's up to us to establish a post-retirement benefit, and then the General Assembly come along the year later and they fund it. And talking with y'all and with you know, governors and OPB, they see it exactly the opposite. So while that debate is going on, ERS members are hurting. And we've had a few years ago, we checked with our members, haven't done it recently, and we got some stories that were heart-wrenching about people who we asked, you know, if you could make a go of it when you first retired, but now you're having problems, tell us about it. And I said, they got to make choices between food or rent or heating or gas for the car or repairs for the car, drugs, medical care, you know, and they lose. It's a lose-lose operation. So at any rate, we would appreciate your consideration of that moving forward. We have a couple other bills which I can talk about later, and I'll be glad to open up for any questions. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee.
Okay. Can you hear me? Can you hear me now? Okay. Sound like the Verizon commercial. Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman. My name is Carol Schwinney, and that's SCHWINNE, so the bicycle with an E on the end. I am Director of Administration for the Department of Audits and Accounts. And you all know Mr. Griffin, so I work with Mr. Griffin. So our department is responsible by law for preparing the retirement certifications that you all will see and review and either vote to pass or not pass in the committee. So we provide an unbiased assessment of the bill, and then we will report out to you whether or not that bill is a fiscal bill or a non-fiscal bill. So that is our responsibility. During the first session of the biennial session, during the off-season, we will work with the actuary to get actuarial investigations prepared on behalf of the committees for any fiscal bills, so that you all can assess what the cost of those bills would be and make determinations on whether or not it's appropriate to seek funding for those bills with the appropriations committees. So we will be attending the retirement committee meetings, and we are available to answer any questions that you might have regarding any of the bills, and we're happy to help however we can.
I want to thank you very much for what y'all do. I did receive a stack of certifications yesterday and been reading through them, and I really do appreciate the work and effort and professionalism y'all put into this, and it takes a lot of the pressure off us. And so thank y'all very much.
I'm Blake Travis. I'm with Legislative Council, and I've enjoyed working with retirement committees in both the House and the Senate for, I believe this is the sixth session. So please let me know if there's any way I can, interpret law for you or draft retirement bills. I'm here at your service, and appreciate and look forward to working with you. Thank you.
I want to mention to all new senators and new committee members to please take advantage of the resources that we have in these two groups. It goes back to the old adage, the only silly question is the one that you fail to ask. And so they are the life support of the legislation that we need to get through, and they're extremely important. So when they say that they're willing to help and guide us through, they're being absolutely sincere. So do not neglect to reach out and ask a question if you have one, because it's always easier to blame it on the attorney than to blame it on yourself. So it works out well. Any committee members have any questions or anything?
Where does the state patrols and all fit? I keep looking for employees. Where do they fit in?
They fall under ERS.
They fall under you? Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. The ERS handles the vast majority of all the retirement systems, with the exception of TRS, I believe, is the only difference, and that's for the educators. But I believe that they do share some health care aspects between the two plans. Is that correct? Yep. Thank you. Yeah, Senator.
Can you tell me how, and I in the last few days, I guess, because of being on this committee, people have...
Who's your question directed to?
Oh, I'm sorry, to Mr. Jim? Okay, I'm sorry, thank you. Been hit with several people, including one of them being my sister-in-law, who's a retired DFACS worker, and blah, blah, blah type deal. And of course, you know the question. How did the train get off the track as far as giving annual cost of living raises and that type of deal?
It's based on the fundamental difference between how the two boards, the ERS and the TRS boards, elected to handle their COLAs way back in the late 1960s, early 1970s. If you look in statute, the language is actually pretty similar, and it gives the boards broad authority and discretion for how they want to administer COLAs. TRS, as I implied, basically included all of the calculations, all of the associated liabilities, assuming that they were going to pay COLAs going forward at that time. ERS decided to treat it on a more or less pay-as-you-go or ad hoc basis. When ERS was smaller and when the total number of retirees was less compared to the total number of actives in the plan, that was tenable. Today, you're talking about a $15 billion system where if we paid a 3% COLA, it would cost almost $400 million to the plan. You can see where that would add up pretty quickly over time. When the system is at or near 100% funding, that may be possible to do. Right now, we're at 75% funded, and we have an unfunded liability that we're attempting to pay off. Our contributions are already relatively higher, and the board has been reluctant to take on additional liability and additional costs on a long-term basis by paying out the COLAs. Again, some of this is due to factors that were entirely beyond our control, perhaps predictable in the long term, but the dot-com crash and the Great Recession, the housing market crash, happening within 8 years of each other, they take a toll on a system like ours. In addition, again, our payroll is relatively large compared to the size of our system. So as the markets improve and we have to continue to pay out benefits, we can't just bank the investment earnings and keep them growing. We're paying some of that money out, so it takes us longer to recover than it does for a less quote-unquote mature pension system. So all of those things together just mean that the profile of the system is different today than it was 20, 30 years ago. And we have to be a little bit more careful about making long-term commitments, and that's been the board's kind of perspective in the past 10 or 12 years.
Thank you, Jim. And I do want to point out one thing, and he hit on it, is, this has been a problem, an issue that's been going on for a while. So it's going to take a while to untie everything and try to come up with a comfortable solution for everybody. And so it's coming into this position, I knew this would be the primary issue that we would discuss. and with that number. But one thing I think that'll help, and I'm going to reach out to Blake and put him on the spot if he's okay with that. I'd like for Blake, if you would, explain the difference between retirement committee and the other committees as far as the obligation within the first year of the research and the hurdles we have to overcome to get to the point in other committees they can pretty much fly through this stuff. But I think it would help the committee members to understand.
Sure, I'd be glad to, Mr. Chairman. The retirement bills have a specific procedures set out for introducing and passing them in Title 47, I believe it's Chapter 20. The Constitution requires that the General Assembly enact legislation that controls retirement bills to ensure that the retirement systems remain funded and on track. And to do that, the process is there's two different types of bills. There's a retirement bill having a fiscal impact, and there's a retirement bill that does not have a fiscal impact. If it's a retirement bill that does not have a fiscal impact, it needs to be introduced by day 20 of any session, but day 20, and that bill can proceed as with a normal bill. There's also the fiscal retirement bills. There's a specific definition for those that is in the code, and actually the state auditor's office, Greg Griffin and Carol Schwinny, make the decision as to whether a bill is fiscal or a non-fiscal retirement bill. The fiscal retirement bills, they have to be introduced anytime during the first session of the biennium. So this year, 2021, the odd years, those bills will be introduced. No action is taken on the bills until the second year of the biennium, so the even years. Generally what happens is following this session, the committees, the House and the Senate retirement committees, whether jointly or separately, review each of the fiscal retirement bills that has been passed, and they choose whether or not to send those bills forward for an actuarial investigation. The actuarial investigation there takes place thereafter, and the reports usually come back around October 15th or so. And those reports tell the committee exactly how much the change to the law would cost to the retirement system. They provide for a first-year cost as well as a kind of an amortized long-term cost. So you might see a bill come back that shows the first-year cost is $500,000, and it would cause an increase to the employer contribution rate, which is generally what the state pays, of, a 0.5%. So that money would come from the appropriations moving forward. The first-year cost, say that first $500,000, has to be appropriated in the General Appropriations Act. It has to be there funded for July 1 of the even year. So when you're passing a fiscal retirement bill, it's going to carry over. It's a 2-year process. If there's money required to fund the bill, it needs to be in the budget, and that bill becomes effective on July 1 of the even year. So, and to answer a question, a retirement bill is any bill that affects a retirement system. So it's about the broadest definition that you can get. And to play it safe, if you think it's going to affect a retirement system, then we send it to the state auditor, Greg Griffin, who gets to make the decision of whether or not it meets the definition of non-fiscal or fiscal. Hopefully that's helpful.
Any questions from the committee? Senator Walker?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So to the Ledge Council, just hypothetically, if we were to have a policy change with regard to allowing retired teachers to come back and teach beyond the 49% rule that we have now, that sounds like that might also be a retirement bill.
It would definitely be a retirement bill. It would impact the retirement system.
And it would be a fiscal retirement bill, I would think.
Historically, those bills have been certified as fiscal retirement bills.
Thank you.
I think the only thing that might change that is I think in the governor's teacher pipeline legislation that the retirement of the teacher who comes back is not impacted because the teacher does not reconnect to the retirement system, to the TRS. My understanding is that the district would negotiate a salary with the teacher. The district would pay the normal payment to the retirement system that they would pay for a regular teacher and the regular teacher if they were connected to the retirements portion also as a whole. But that would go into the retirement system even though it would not go to that teacher. It would not reconnect them back to the retirement. But in those types of situations, the ultimate determination on whether it would be physical or non-physical would rest with the state audit group that would send out a certification that would determine if it was or if it was not. And as protection for us and as a backstop, we would follow that recommendation. So occasionally when some do feel like that they might, once that the governor's office came over and discussed that, it seems to be that it would be non-physical, but that ultimate determination would be made by our friends down on the corner. Any other questions, concerns? Let me see if I can get the right 7 plugged in. You may be 8 by some chance. Yeah, let's see.
Now, just like to add, we have not seen the details of the latest proposal or legislation, so I really can't speak to whether it's fiscal or not fiscal, but generally we've returned these return to work bills as fiscal because they typically change the retirement patterns of the teachers. So that's sort of the history of why those have been fiscal. But we would want to take a look at the specifics that are in the current legislation or proposed legislation. So.
Exactly.
If I may, I probably should have answered in the lawyer term, it depends. I should have said that, the devil's in the details with most of these, with pretty much any of the legislation. And I was answering in a very generic, broad sense on these return to work type ideas.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Grace Akan. I'm a lobbyist with the Georgia Association of Educators. You will probably also see our chief lobbyist, Joe Fleming. We intend to very much be present at these committee meetings, given that we have a large cohort of our association that is retirees. Suffice it to say, we will be monitoring TRS, of course. We understand that there might be some proposed legislation around the teacher shortages, and so again, we'll just be here monitoring those. Thank you for your time.
And you said you're with the Georgia Association of Educators?
That's correct, sir.
How large is your membership here in Georgia?
We have, I believe, 20,000 members. I couldn't tell you off the top of my head how many of those are retirees, but I can get back to you on that.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I'm sorry, could you
Yes,
clarify your
ma'am.
last name?
Akan. You can say however you want. You're all going to bungle it, so I don't care. But it's A-K as in kangaroo, A as in apple, N as in Nancy. So A-K-A-N.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Akon.
Thank you.
Any other committee member? If not, I would like to thank everybody for coming to the first retirement committee meeting. I want to thank all the committee members for showing up in force and all of the resources for showing up and educating us on your value, and I appreciate you greatly. And y'all have a blessed day, and thank you. This meeting is adjourned.